This is my Sarguelli, one of the hospitals here at the Cincinnati VA. I'm making this video to show you guys how I like to do my discharge medication reconciliations to facilities. I've made a video previously, but there's been some changes in the flow, and so I just want to make sure that those are integrated into this video. So let me go ahead and tell you what my thoughts are. When I get started, there are only two things that I really care about. One is that I get the medications right, and then two is that it's easy for the receiving facility to understand what the medications the patient is on. So I'll get into what that all means here in a second, but remember that the receiving facility oftentimes doesn't care what kind of dose changes there were or what kind of medications the patient was on that they're no longer on. And so we want to make sure that we streamline things as best as possible with some notable exceptions, and I'll get into those here in a second. Okay, so the first place that I always start out with is I always start at this pharmacy admission medication reconciliation note. This will be done within the first 48 hours of a hospital stay by either a pharmacist or a pharmacy tech. So we've talked about this in the other video, the discharging home, but this really outlines what medications the patient was on prior to arrival. And so the three times that I'll look at this is the first time that it gets entered in the chart, 1 to 2 days after the patient arrives. The second time is when the patient transfers out of the ICU and then I'm not seeing them, that I didn't actually do the medication reconciliation initially. And then the third time is when I'm discharging the patient. Okay, this is not a substitute for a proper and appropriate medication reconciliation, but it does allow you to pick up on things that maybe you missed. So for instance, in this particular note, it says that the albuterol here was expired. And so I might have missed asking the patient about that medicine, but the pharmacist makes note that, hey, even though this expired, the patient is using this 1 to 2 times a month. So remember that expired meds is different than discontinued meds. Expired meds just means that they weren't renewed and the patient still might be taking them. And so anytime that you're looking at any kind of expired meds during discharge, you might want to consider, or you really want to consider renewing any of the expired medications if they're still clinically indicated for the patient. So I've done that now. And then the next thing I'll do is I'll look to see how the changes are from the medications that the patient is currently on versus the medications that the patient was on as an outpatient. There's a couple ways to do this. You could do this the hard way, which is really comparing the note or the medications here or comparing the medications here. The easier way to do it, however, is to really use the medication reconciliation tool as your guide. So you can go to this medication reconciliation tool there, and then we're going to discharge this patient to a facility. Okay, so what this will do is it will juxtapose in red the inpatient medications against the active or discontinued or expired outpatient medication, which are in black here. Okay, so let me go ahead and quickly walk you through this, and I'll show you the big changes that exist. So amlodipine is the same. Lisinopril, you can see that this was a half of a 40 milligram tablet, so they were on 20 milligrams as an outpatient, but only 10 as an inpatient. The other ones that are changes is that this apixaban, so ignore this discontinued. Let's say it was discontinued a year ago. This apixaban is a medication that they are on inpatient, but they're not on outpatient there. And then the other one to draw your attention to is that this albuterol is discontinued, but they were taking it. Here it is active. And then we changed the dose of the Synthroid down here. You can see that they're on 50 milligrams as an outpatient, but only 25 milligrams as an inpatient here. And then we're also going to draw our attention to any medications that they're on as an outpatient that aren't active as an inpatient. And so here you can see this hydrocortisone is active as an inpatient, but you can see it's discontinued, meaning not active as an inpatient. So we want to zero in on all of those things. The next thing to do is once you've figured out what changes you want to make based on this outline here, you can go ahead and open up your CPRS. A lot of people will do this where they have one column here and then they have another column there. And so they can cross-reference this to that and make the changes as needed. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure, because I'm discharging to a facility, is that all of these inpatient medications really reflect the medications that I want them to be on at their facility. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make those changes here. I'm going to essentially move this hydro hydrocortisone up top there, and then make some changes. So this is going to be the hydrocortisone. I'm going to go tools, and I'm going to do things like action, and then transfer this to inpatient. The same way that you guys know how to do the admission, like reconciliation and moving things to inpatient. Same type of thing here. Okay, I'm going to go and make changes to these medications, and I'll be with you guys in one quick second. Okay, so through the power of the pause button, I have made those changes that I talked about. So now we should see medications that are either changed or that I brought from outpatient to inpatient be active or pending on the inpatient side. Okay, so let's go ahead and get going here, and we can kind of take a look. And you can see that what we want to do is we want to make changes on the inpatient side here. So we're going to click this Make Changes on Inpatient Meds button there. Okay, so here I'm going to go ahead and re-click this, make changes on inpatient medications. And the big thing is I want to zero in on these red ones, okay, in comparison to the outpatient ones. So amlodipine looks like it's the same. So I will go ahead and duplicate, omit, or not taking, okay? So what this does is it omits it from the final discharge medication reconciliation note, and it really makes it cleaner to look at. So I'm going to omit that, but I'm going to continue this. Now this lisinopril here was one that we changed. Okay, I will tell you how I do things, but if you're attending or your personal preference is a little bit different, then go ahead and do what you think is appropriate. Now, they came in on 20 milligrams, like we talked about, but we're going to send them out on 10 milligrams. Now, I will tell you what my preference is I will omit the outpatient one to not mark it up and then just say continue this, or I can even say this is a new dose from from 20 milligrams here is what I could write there. And so it does indicate that there's been a change, but it won't put the old one down. So the reason that I tend to do this, or actually what I will do is I'll also put continue. Those are my two options. Is it really makes it cleaner for the facility to understand what they're on, because they don't necessarily care that the lisinopril was at a higher dose before and now it's a little bit lower. So you can do one of a couple things there when there's a dose change. You can either continue, because you're continuing it from inpatient to outpatient. You could put both this as an old dose and this is a new dose, though that does get really tricky because it lists essentially lisinopril on two different lines. Or you could just select that this is a new dose here. So let me continue on. We're going to go ahead and omit this one. We're going to continue this. Let's say that this apixaban is a new medication here. Ignore this discontinued. Let's just say they weren't on it, or that let's say it was discontinued a year ago and they're no longer on it, and now I want them on it. This is one that I'll go ahead and put new medication for this apixaban because it's a new medication that we started in the hospital. And this is one that I want to make sure that the facility is aware is a new medication. And so we can say here for AFib, we'll call it, is what we'll say there. Okay. Now, let's say that we actually don't want this aspirin to be on as at a facility. Okay. And let's say they were on it here, like this is active. They were on it as an outpatient. This is one that I might actually go in and say discontinue. So this S discontinue is it will lay out that they no longer are going to be on it. And so I can say here, because of DOAC, for instance, and let's say it's stable CAD and they no longer need this because the event was years and years ago and they've been stable, or whatever you want to say. Okay. So now this aspirin is discontinued here, and it's listed as an inpatient. So this would be one that you could actually omit because we don't want that being on the outpatient medication list going to that facility. And so I'm going to continue going through here. I'm going to go omit that one, continue this, omit this one, continue that, omit this one, continue this. And you can see that if you can get into a good flow, you can actually go pretty quick with this. Okay. So this one I'm going to omit. I'm going to omit that one. I'm going to continue this, omit, continue. This acai berry, let's say I want it or don't want it. It doesn't necessarily like, I won't, you could figure out a way to transfer this into an inpatient, but a lot of these herbs and vitamins aren't going to be that possible to do. So I'll actually end up omitting this, or I could even say continue, and then they won't get it at the facility, but at least will be on the medication list that they'll get. Okay. And then here we'll go ahead and let's say we change this synthroid here. This could be one, and you can see 50 micrograms is active, and it looks like they were actually on 50. Okay, so this is not a change, but if we wanted to change it, you could do the same thing that we did before, but let's say it's just continued at the 50 dose because this is 50 and that's 50. So then because there's so many listed here, I'll omit and I'll omit. Okay, so once I've got all of these filled in, I can now click here and say that I'm finished reviewing. So I can say farm review completed. Actually, it's this button that should be unclicked, but I'll go ahead and click that. And now what I can do is I can copy this to clipboard, and this allows me to, let me make a quick note about this double check. This double check, you really want to make sure that this double check doesn't change your flow too much, that you pay attention to it. It just says, hey, this aspirin got stopped. These inpatient meds were not continued. You just want to make sure that it makes sense to you. Like this apixaban was maybe listed twice, if I'm not mistaken, or we said new there. And so you want to make sure that you pay attention to it. But a lot of times it can be, it's a computer trying to tell you what is right and wrong. And sometimes it won't make that much sense. So just be very careful with that. Okay. So now I'm here. I'm going to go and grab this entire note. I'm going to cut it. Okay, and then I'm ready to paste it. So I just hit Control C. You can also hit copy to clipboard. That's another thing that you can do. And I believe that it copies it to clipboard, but I'm just gonna go ahead and hit C just in case. And then I'm gonna go here, and now it's time for my medication reconciliation note. Okay, so I'm gonna go notes here. And I'm going to select this discharge medication reconciliation note. And remember that this one's going to a facility. Okay. So the nice thing is if I need to review that pharmacy medication reconciliation note, this is another opportunity to do it. And it's not a bad idea to click it one last time just to make sure that there's nothing that they were on that you're missing. Okay. But so here I'm going to continue on. I'm going to go ahead and put my information here. And then here I am available by teams. And let's say they're going to a skilled nursing facility like we've been talking about. We've reviewed their allergies. There are no outpatient medications on the above list that haven't been started on the inpatient. So that's like what we were kind of talking about. This example would be like the steroid that we started, the hydrocortisone. So we have reviewed that. We have started on an inpatient side, and this is no longer a yes. There's not on warfarin here. Antibiotics. This is one. Sometimes you'll send patients off to antibiotics, and I'll just kind of show you what this is all about. So you can say ceftriaxone here. So ceftriaxone. And let's say that you have 2 grams Q day or something like that. That's your dosing. And then you'd put in last day of therapy here. And then you would order that as an inpatient. Okay. But since we're not sending this patient out antibiotics, I'm going to go and just click no. And then that will ignore that. And then are they going to be discharged on a sliding scale insulin? You can either hit yes here, and you can essentially type in your free text. This patient, we're not going to send out on a sliding scale insulin. And then this is the one thing to keep in mind is that you have to discontinue all outpatient medications in CPRS after you complete this note. The reason that exists is because you want to make sure that the receiving physician, once that patient leaves the nursing home, has a really clean medication list. So what will happen is that the discharging physician and discharging team at the facility will orchestrate what medications need to be active with the patient at the time of discharge. So because we're looking at one cross-section in time and space, and we don't know how long they'll be at that facility and what could happen in that facility and what medications they'll need to be on when they leave that facility, that's the reason that we discontinue all the outpatient medications. Okay. So then if we're going to a new facility or a CLC, you can click this one. Otherwise, if they're going to something like a facility locally, you can click that one. Now we can go okay here, and then it will generate this note, which effectively, and this consult. So we'll say this patient is discharging at that point. Let's say they're going to Oak Harbor Nursing Facility, and then the transportation consult is complete, and they're leaving between noon and 2 today. We'll go ahead and hit here. They were in for AFib, and it's indicated to be today. We'll go ahead and sign this. That makes the pharmacy aware that that's coming. And then we'll go ahead and take this last step here, and we'll cut and paste our note here. Okay, now the last thing I'll do is I'll look here to make sure that this all looks appropriate, like the way that I expect it to look. And so you can see that this is a pretty clean medication reconciliation. Like there's only 3 columns. It says stop, it says continue, and it says new. There's no old dose, new dose. There's no hold. You can hold medications. Like you can go back and you can actually go to meds here and then hold medications and it will appear under held. You just need to make sure that that's reflected in your in that medication reconciliation tool. But so let's say we didn't want to hold any medications and we can go ahead and sign this. Okay. Now this is the note that they'll that the physician will complete, and then the pharmacy will take that medication reconciliation that we submitted, that request for the consult, and they'll do their things, and then they'll plop essentially the final medication reconciliation in the chart, and that's the one that will get cut and pasted into the discharge summary. Now, the final step here is I want to make sure that I discontinue all of these medications that they were on, including if there are any expired medications that need to be discontinued. As we talked about, expired doesn't necessarily mean discontinued. So this is where I'll go through both the active and the expired medications to make sure that I discontinue anything that needs to be discontinued. And here, just a simple shift button will go ahead and take care of that. And then I can hit discontinue there. And then go ahead and just finally click the yes, I want to discontinue all of these medications, which it looks like this. And I can say physician requested, and then I can go there and it will go ahead and cancel these. Once I sign these orders. So you'll see they're here, and then I can sign all those orders just by simply going here and refreshing patient information. I'm not going to sign those orders though, just so you guys are aware, but that's how you would do it. Okay, so that's how you discharge a medication reconciliation to a facility. If you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out to either me, mysore.gwelly2@va.gov. I'm also available on Teams, or any of your attendings are excellent at taking care of this stuff. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have yourselves a nice day.